The Raktari fleet hovered in the void, a seamless armada of destruction poised to claim another human colony. Zarkon, towering in his command chamber, gazed at the holographic display of the planet below. His mandibles clicked with disdain. Humans were resilient in their desperation but predictable. Their defenses, primitive by Raktari standards, crumbled like sandcastles under the tide of his empire. Their fear is palpable, Zarkon proclaimed to his officers. They scramble like prey, knowing they stand no chance against us. Laughter rippled through the chamber, a sound of grinding clicks and guttural growls. To the Raktari, humanity's reliance on diplomacy and retreat was a sign of inherent weakness, not strategy. A blip appeared on the display, drawing the attention of the room. "High Commander," a subordinate called out. "A single human vessel is approaching at high velocity." Zarkon's mandibles spread in a smirk. A lone ship? This was either an act of desperation or foolish bravado. "Let them come," he said, dismissing the warning. "Destroy it before it reaches the fleet." As the ship entered range, Zarkon felt an odd tension settle over the room. The vessel wasn't standard military design. Its sharp angles and sleek profile spoke of engineering with purpose. Before anyone could react, the ship's weapons blazed to life. The first Raktari frigate fell without a sound, its shields inexplicably overwhelmed by pinpoint strikes that left it dead in the void. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared as the human ship darted between Raktari vessels, moving with a precision that defied expectations. Zarkon watched in disbelief as the unknown pilot outmaneuvered his fleet, delivering calculated devastation. "How is this possible?" he growled, his claws digging into the armrests of his throne. "A single human ship cannot." A second frigate erupted into flames. The human vessel seemed to anticipate every move, disabling engines, targeting weapon systems, and sowing disorder. Zarkon's memory flashed to the whispered tales his soldiers spoke in hushed tones. Baba Yaga. A ghost, a myth among humans, they said. He had dismissed it as nonsense. Now, as he watched the unrelenting assault, a cold realization settled in. This was no ordinary human. The Raktari, so accustomed to crushing resistance with brute force, found themselves paralyzed. Panic spread through the ranks as the human ship broadcast eerie messages onto their comms, distorted voices delivering cryptic warnings. The psychological impact was devastating. Zarkon could see it in the faces of his officers: fear, confusion, doubt. The human they mocked had become the predator, and they the prey. His flagship shuddered under a sudden impact, the lights dimming for a moment. "What happened?" Zarkon barked. Before his crew could respond, the lights flickered again. "She's here," someone whispered, the words barely audible. Zarkon turned sharply, but the fear in the room was infectious. A moment later, the bridge's doors hissed open. Silence fell. She moved like a shadow, stepping into the command chamber with an air of lethal calm. Baba Yaga. Clad in a sleek tactical suit that reflected no light, she seemed almost spectral, her presence commanding. Zarkon rose to his full height, towering over her, but the confidence in his posture faltered under her unflinching gaze. "Zarkon," she said, her voice steady, laced with contempt. "You think fear is a weakness? Let me educate you." Her words cut deeper than any weapon. His soldiers moved to intercept, but with a flick of her wrist, she dispatched them. Their weapons malfunctioned mid-fire, precision strikes from her unseen drones leaving them incapacitated. She advanced, her every step deliberate, as though she had all the time in the universe. "You're nothing more than a glorified bully," she said, her tone sharp and measured. "You've mistaken restraint for cowardice. That mistake ends today." Zarkon lunged, his claws swiping with the force of a predator. She sidestepped effortlessly, her movements fluid, almost inhuman. In the blink of an eye, she was behind him, her blade pressed to his throat. "Do you feel it now?" she whispered, her voice low and dangerous. "That tightening in your chest? That's fear. The same fear you used to control others. Now it's yours." His bravado crumbled. Zarkon, the conqueror, the unyielding general of the Raktari dominion, trembled. The realization struck him like a blow. She had orchestrated everything. The ambush, the psychological warfare, the crippling of his fleet, it was all her design. "Please," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "Spare me." Her blade lingered for a moment before she withdrew it. "You're not worth it," she said, turning away. As she left the chamber, her voice echoed behind her, cold and resolute. "Remember this day. Tell your people. Humanity does not fear war. We end it." The woman who would become Baba Yaga was once a soldier like any other, a cog in humanity's desperate machine of survival. She had a name then, a life filled with the mundane joys of family and friends. But the Rakhtari took all of that. Their first wave of attacks wiped entire colonies from existence. Her home was one of them. She had been off-world on deployment when it happened. By the time she returned, there was nothing left but ash and echoes of the lives that had once been. Grief hardened into resolve. Where others despaired, she trained. Where others faltered, she advanced. She pushed her body to its limits, surpassing even the most rigorous standards set by Earth's military. But it wasn't just her physical strength that set her apart, it was her mind. She studied Rakhtari tactics obsessively, dissecting their strengths, exposing their weaknesses, and finding the gaps where humanity could strike. She learned to think like them, anticipate them, and eventually outsmart them. Her transformation was not an accident. Earth's military saw her potential and subjected her to the most advanced and experimental training regimens humanity had to offer. She endured grueling simulations, cybernetic enhancements, and isolation that would have broken lesser soldiers. Yet, each trial only sharpened her resolve. With time, her name faded, replaced by whispered rumors of a warrior who could not be stopped. Baba Yaga, the ghost who struck without warning and vanished without a trace, was born. Her legend grew not through victories alone but through the fear she inspired. Where Baba Yaga fought, she left not just destruction but a psychological wound. The Rakhtari feared her not because of her strength but because she embodied everything they did not understand about humans: their unpredictability, their capacity to endure, and their refusal to yield. Humanity's war against the Rakhtari was not one of equals. The alien empire had technological superiority, greater numbers, and a brutal efficiency honed over centuries of conquest. Humanity, by contrast, had been a fledgling player in the galactic arena, barely venturing beyond its solar system. When the Rakhtari arrived, humanity's initial resistance was pitiful. Entire fleets were annihilated, and colonies were subjugated or destroyed. But humanity refused to die quietly. Leaders rose, not just from military ranks but from scientists, engineers, and ordinary people who refused to surrender. They repurposed what little technology they had, developing new weapons and defenses. Guerrilla tactics became their lifeline, striking where the Rakhtari least expected and vanishing before retaliation could follow. What humanity lacked in resources, it made up for in unity. Entire populations worked together, pooling knowledge and skills. Spacecraft engineers turned freighters into warships. Civilians volunteered for combat training, knowing the odds were stacked against them. Even the smallest victories were celebrated, not because they shifted the war but because they proved that survival was still possible. Baba Yaga became the symbol of this struggle. Her victories inspired others, showing that even the mightiest could fall. She wasn't just a soldier, she was a message to the Rakhtari: humanity could not be broken. The Rakhtari were masters of domination, their empire spanning countless systems. They had faced resistance before, but none of it had ever truly threatened their supremacy. To them, humans were just another species to be subdued, another trophy for their empire. They expected submission. They expected fear. What they encountered instead was a kind of resilience they could neither comprehend nor predict. In their arrogance, the Rakhtari failed to see the potential for humanity to adapt. They viewed humans as weak prey, creatures too fragile and disorganized to mount any real challenge. This miscalculation was their undoing. While the Rakhtari relied on overwhelming force and rigid tactics, humanity thrived on chaos and innovation. They turned every loss into a lesson, every defeat into a stepping stone. Baba Yaga was the culmination of this evolution. She embodied the very traits the Raktari had overlooked: creativity, perseverance, and an unrelenting drive to survive. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a weapon forged by humanity's collective will to endure. Through her, humanity showed the galaxy that weakness was not the absence of strength but the potential for it. The Raktari couldn't understand her because she represented the one thing their empire had never faced before: a species that refused to be conquered. The Raktari fleet operated on precision and discipline, but that structure began to fracture under the weight of fear. It started with whispers: captured ships found adrift with no sign of the crew, only cryptic messages etched into their walls. "The shadows are watching." These words, written in the blood of the captured, spread panic through the ranks. Soldiers who once saw themselves as invincible began to second-guess every sound, every flicker in the darkness. Baba Yaga's tactics were surgical. Her team, if she even had one, was never seen. Raktari officers were found dead in their quarters, their bodies untouched but their expressions frozen in terror. Broadcasts hijacked their communications, the distorted voice of Baba Yaga delivering chilling promises of destruction. It wasn't just psychological, it was destabilizing. Orders went unheeded, morale plummeted, and desertions began to rise. She knew their fear was her weapon. She didn't need a fleet to fight them, she needed to make them fight themselves. False alarms became commonplace. Entire squadrons wasted resources chasing phantoms. Each loss wasn't just a blow to their forces but to their pride. The Raktari had never been hunted before, and now, hunted they were, by an enemy who struck with precision and vanished without a trace. Zarkon stood in his command chamber, his confidence eroding with each passing day. Reports piled up, each more damning than the last. His fleet was unraveling, not from external pressure but from within. Baba Yaga's shadow loomed over everything, her name whispered even in his most trusted circles. He slammed a clawed hand onto the console, his frustration boiling over. "Enough of this coward's game!" But even as he bellowed, doubt crept into his mind. How could one human be doing this? Was she even human? The stories painted her as a phantom, an avenger of the human race, but Zarkon had dismissed such nonsense. Now, he wasn't so sure. His paranoia deepened. Every shadow in the corridors seemed to mock him. Every malfunction in the ship's systems felt like her doing. He began second-guessing his officers, suspecting them of incompetence or worse, betrayal. The Raktari were a proud species, but pride was no match for the suffocating fear Baba Yaga inspired. In desperation, Zarkon abandoned the strategic objectives that had defined their campaign. He issued a single order: find her, no matter the cost. He diverted resources, pulled back forces, and scoured the stars for any trace of her. But she stayed one step ahead, always watching, always waiting. Humanity was no longer on the defensive. Under Baba Yaga's guidance, they transformed from a desperate species clinging to survival into a force capable of fighting back. Her methods, while unconventional, galvanized the human resistance. Her victories weren't just tactical, they were symbolic. With each Raktari defeat, humanity's resolve grew stronger. The turning point came during a coordinated assault on a critical Raktari stronghold. Baba Yaga didn't just lead the charge, she orchestrated it. Her plans were meticulous, her strategies unpredictable. She had studied the Raktari long enough to know how to exploit their weaknesses. Every human soldier knew their role, and every move was calculated to maximize impact. The battle wasn't just about destroying a target. It was a message, to the Raktari and to humanity itself. For the first time, the Raktari found themselves on the defensive, their forces overwhelmed not by numbers but by sheer ingenuity and determination. Baba Yaga's presence on the battlefield was electric, a reminder to her enemies that no one was untouchable and to her allies that victory was within their grasp. The stronghold fell, not just in flames but in spirit. The Raktari's once unshakable confidence was shattered. The humans, led by the legend they had created, had turned the tide. This wasn't just a battle, it was the moment humanity reclaimed its future. Zarkon had marshaled his elite forces, a fleet assembled from the most fearsome ships in the Rakhtari arsenal. It was meant to be an unbreakable wall of power, a testament to his authority and strength. Yet, as they entered the sector where Baba Yaga had been tracked, the silence of the void became oppressive. No chatter from scouts, no signs of the lone human vessel, just an eerie, suffocating quiet. Then chaos erupted. Explosions tore through his fleet with surgical precision, disabling engines and severing communication lines. Baba Yaga had used the terrain, a graveyard of destroyed ships from previous battles, to lay a trap. Mines hidden among the wreckage detonated, sending shockwaves rippling through the Rakhtari formation. Zarkhan's flagship shuddered under the impact, alarms blaring as he barked orders. "Reorganize! Focus fire!" But his commands were met with confusion. The fleet's tight formation worked against them, turning every explosion into collateral damage. Baba Yaga's ship darted in and out of the chaos, invisible to their scanners, striking with uncanny precision. Messages began flooding the Rakhtari comm channels. Baba Yaga's voice, distorted and calm, played over and over. "You've stepped into the grave you dug for others." Soldiers froze at their stations, fear taking hold. Zarkhan could feel it too. His forces were unraveling, and for the first time in his long career, he realized he was losing not just a battle but his grip on power. The bridge of Zarkhan's flagship was in ruins, sparks flying from shattered consoles as fires raged around him. His crew lay scattered, some dead, others too terrified to fight. And then, in the flickering light, she appeared. Baba Yaga. She moved with the same deliberate precision that had dismantled his fleet, her footsteps echoing ominously in the silence. Zarkhan stood tall, his pride refusing to let him cower, but he couldn't suppress the cold fear crawling up his spine. "Zarkhan," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You believed fear was your weapon. You wielded it against the weak, but you never understood its true power." He bared his teeth in defiance. "You think this changes anything? You're one human. My empire will crush your kind." She stepped closer, her eyes locked onto his. "You're wrong," she said calmly. "Humanity is not weak. We adapt, we endure, and when pushed, we fight back." Her words were steady, almost conversational, but each one carried the weight of truth. Zarkhan's bravado faltered. He could see it in her eyes. There was no hatred, no rage, only a cold, unshakable certainty. She was everything he had feared, a force of nature that no empire could control. As she raised a blade to his throat, he dropped to his knees, his pride crumbling under the weight of his terror. "Please," he rasped, his voice trembling. "Spare me." Her gaze didn't waver. "You don't deserve mercy," she said, her tone devoid of emotion. "But this isn't about you. This is about sending a message." Baba Yaga lowered her weapon, stepping back. "Go," she said. "Return to your empire and tell them what happened here. Tell them humanity will not be their prey. Next time, there will be no mercy." Zarkhan stared at her, his once imposing figure reduced to a trembling shadow of itself. He could barely nod before staggering to his feet and retreating. As she watched him leave, she spoke one last time, her voice resolute and final. "Remember this day. It is the day humanity stopped fearing the dark." The Rakhtari forces, once an unstoppable juggernaut, retreated in disarray. What had once been an empire of certainty now crumbled under the weight of its arrogance. The loss of their fleets, the disintegration of their morale, and the psychological scars left by Baba Yaga's campaign rippled through their territories. Colonies they had subjugated rose in rebellion, inspired by the same defiance that had saved humanity. For humanity, the victory was more than survival, it was a rebirth. Planets scarred by war began to rebuild, and for the first time, humanity wasn't just defending itself but shaping its destiny among the stars. Where once they were seen as fragile and naive, now they were regarded with caution and respect. Other species, watching from the sidelines, took note. Humanity's resilience, its capacity to turn desperation into strength, and the specter of Baba Yaga left an indelible mark on the galactic stage. The war had reshaped everything. Humanity emerged not as victims but as victors, their position in the galaxy redefined. No longer just another species in the vast expanse, they were now a force to be reckoned with. The legend of Baba Yaga spread far beyond the battlefield. Her name became synonymous with humanity's spirit, a ghostly figure whose actions had turned the tide of an unwinnable war. Stories of her exploits reached every corner of the galaxy, some exaggerated, others grounded in chilling reality. To the Raktari, she was a nightmare, a specter whose shadow haunted their every move. To humanity, she was a symbol of hope and strength. Yet Baba Yaga herself disappeared after the war's end. Some believed she had died in the final confrontation, her mission fulfilled. Others speculated that she lived in secrecy, watching over humanity from the shadows. Her absence only deepened the myth, turning her into more than a warrior. She became an idea. And that idea was what inspired humanity to thrive. Soldiers trained with her tactics, leaders studied her strategies, and everyday people carried her determination in their hearts. Baba Yaga wasn't just a person, she was proof of what humanity could achieve when pushed to the brink. Her name, whispered in fear by her enemies and in reverence by her people, became eternal. The alien general's words, once spoken with smug arrogance, had become bitterly ironic. Humans, he had claimed, feared war. But humanity had proven otherwise. They didn't just endure war, they mastered it. In the ashes of a galaxy once ruled by oppression, humanity stood tall, their spirit unbroken. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united by the belief that no force, no matter how mighty, could extinguish the light of their resolve.